Picture this. You're Kurt Busch, the 2004 NASCAR champion. You're one of the most feared and volatile drivers on the circuit, and you're sitting in a Delaware courtroom under oath telling a judge that your ex-girlfriend is a government-trained assassin who once showed up to dinner in a blood-soaked evening gown. That wasn't a movie, and it wasn't a bit. That is actually what happened in January of 2015 in a real family court on public record, with reporters from ESPN, ABC, CNN, and NPR in the room. And here's the thing that should send a chill down your spine. Nobody challenged him. Before we get into the assassin part, and we will get into that, let's talk about who Kurt Busch is, because the context matters here. Kurt Busch isn't just some fringe driver. He was the 2004 NASCAR Cup Series champion, a driver known for raw speed and a hair-trigger temper, the kind of guy who once got into a screaming match with a reporter in the garage and didn't even apologize. His nickname was the Outlaw, and he earned it. He was never the beloved crowd favorite that his brother Kyle occasionally has been. Kurt was a little edgier, the guy who made headlines for all the wrong reasons. But he could flat out drive, and for years he was one of the most respected and feared competitors on the track. So when Kurt Busch walked into the courtroom and says something like that, people notice. He's not a man known for wild fights of fantasy. He's a man who's known for being blunt, direct, and sometimes brutally so, which makes what he testified to in January of 2015 all the more impossible to ignore. The woman's name is Patricia Driscoll. She and Busch had been together for about 4 years. On the surface, she was exactly the kind of person you would expect a NASCAR champion to date. High-powered, well-connected, and glamorous in the way that DC insiders often are. Driscoll ran the Armed Forces Foundation, a Washington-based military charity with ties to Congress, the White House, and dozens of other sports organizations, including NASCAR itself. She had built it from scratch, growing its annual revenue to from $100,000 to $8 million. She had direct relationships with the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and the Intelligence Committee. Presidents recognized her work. She co-authored a book on soldiers with PTSD. She was, by every visible measure, a very serious person doing very serious work. She also owned a company called Frontline Defense Systems, a private defense contracting firm that supplied equipment to the U.S. government and to the private sector. She was also authorized to carry weapons. She had spent years in her own biography working in what she had described the narcotics and intelligence world, and she had regular documented access to military installations that civilians simply aren't able to walk into. Now, we need to keep that all in mind. In September of 2014, something happened in Kurt Busch's motorhome at Dover International Speedway. Driscoll says Busch grabbed her by the throat and slammed her into the wall 3 times. She went to the police and filed a protective order. And in January of 2015, they ended up in a Delaware family court to hash it out. Busch denied the assault. His attorney was heavyweight trial lawyer Rusty Hardin, and he was ready to go. And then Busch took the stand, and the story took a turn that nobody in the courtroom expected. Under oath, Kurt Busch testified that Patricia Driscoll was a trained assassin, a covert operative dispatched on missions across Central and South America, as well as Africa and beyond, that she had told him that she killed people for a living, and that she had shown him photographs of bodies with gunshot wounds, and that she had taken him inside Fort Bragg into areas he said that ordinary civilians aren't able to see. He described the night in El Paso, Texas. Driscoll left in camouflage gear and combat boots. She returned hours later wearing a trench coat over a blood-covered evening gown. He said that she claimed to be one of the real women who inspired Jessica Chastain's character in Zero Dark 30, the movie about the CIA's hunt for Osama bin Laden. Then he said this: "Everybody on the outside can tell me I'm crazy, but I lived on the inside and saw it firsthand." That wasn't just Busch saying this. His bus driver testified he believed it. A Christian minister who knew the couple testified also believed it. Multiple people in Busch's orbit had apparently been told or had seen enough to at least entertain the idea that Patricia Driscoll was not just who she appeared to be. The hearing stretched across 4 days, And in all 4 of those days, Driscoll's attorney never directly challenged the assassin testimony. Now just let that sit for a second. Driscoll's explanation, delivered outside the courtroom, was that Busch had taken the stories directly from a movie script that she'd been writing for 8 years, a fictional thriller about a female CIA operative. She said he had even proofread it. She called the accusations ludicrous. And look, that is a reasonable explanation. Fiction becoming confused with reality can happen. Except, she does run a defense contracting company with documented government contracts. She had her own written biography describing years in the narcotics and intelligence world. She had routine access to military bases. She was authorized to carry heavy weapons, and she was deeply embedded with some of the most powerful committees in the United States government. Is she an assassin? Almost certainly not in any formal official sense. But is she someone who has spent years operating in the shadowy overlap between private security, government intelligence, and military contracting, where the lines between fiction and reality could genuinely get blurred? That's a much harder question to dismiss. And the fact that neither she nor her attorney stood up in that courtroom and said, "Your Honor, this is insane. Let me explain exactly who I am and what I do." That's the part that nobody has ever been able to cleanly answer. The protective order was granted against Kurt Busch. NASCAR suspended him. He eventually returned to racing, and the criminal charges were never filed. And the story mostly faded from memory. Driscoll's story, though, got a whole lot stranger. By the summer of 2015, she had resigned from the Armed Forces Foundation following an ESPN investigation that found millions of dollars in financial irregularities. The FBI and IRS opened investigations, and in 2018, she was convicted on fraud and tax evasion charges. In 2019, she was sentenced to a year in prison. So the woman who called herself a pillar of military philanthropy and who denied being anything other than a respectable businesswoman turned out to, at the very least, be running a fraud operation out of a veterans charity. She was lying about something. The question is just which parts. Kurt Busch eventually retired from NASCAR in 2022 after suffering a major concussion. He is now a commentator on Fox Sports occasionally. Patricia Driscoll still maintains her innocence and the assassin claims. She maintains her innocence on the fraud charges too. And somewhere between a blood-stained evening gown in El Paso, a veterans charity in Washington, D.C., and 4 days of family court testimony that nobody refuted, the truth of who Patricia Driscoll actually is remains genuinely unclear. Was she a trained assassin? Probably not. Was she up to something more than she ever officially admitted to? Now that's a question worth asking. So, let me know what you think in the comments.